On the last day of the spring transfer window being open in MLS, with the beginning of their season not going quite the way they'd like it to, Toronto FC made a couple of moves. And these couple of moves have left the fans going, two moves that happened yesterday right before the transfer deadline announced today for Toronto FC in Major League Soccer. First off, we have CJ Sapong coming from Nashville for Lukas MacNaughton, $125,000 in 2024 general allocation money and $75,000 in 2025 general allocation money depending on Sapong's performance and contract status with Toronto FC. Secondly, we get Aimé Mabika from InterMiami for $100,000 in 2024 general allocation money and $100,000 in 2025 general allocation money based off of performance metrics as well as a sell-on fee. So two interesting moves that both kind of work together. But we'll start off with the Sapong-MacNaughton trade. So first off, CJ Sapong, 34-year-old striker who's been a career MLS striker playing for multiple teams throughout the league, but is most notably recognized for his time with the Philadelphia Union. Now this obviously comes off of the complete rotating door of strikers Toronto FC has used this season. 5 different guys have started at striker for Toronto FC so far this season. 6 now, actually, if you count the fact that we played Insigne as kind of a false 9 last game, and overall they've scored 1 goal. 2 if you count Insigne scoring at the end of last game. So obviously the striker position has been TFC's weakest to start the season, and that comes as a surprise to absolutely no one, as with every pre-season roster preview for the season for Toronto FC, the only spot that we didn't say we have a set number 1 starting player in is the striker role. Now, we brought in Aimé Mabika at the beginning of the season, the 33-year-old Norwegian striker, and he played 2 games and immediately got hurt and has not made a reappearance for TFC. Ditto goes for Aquire, who has been in and out of the lineup with injuries, but he too has not been able to consistently get into the starting 11. DeAndre Kerr briefly showed some promise and then quickly did not show promise anymore, and also dealt with a couple injury issues. And we've also tried Jordan Peruxa and Hugo Mbonge at striker, but both of those guys are still a little too young and a little too raw and have yet to showcase that they can regularly play in MLS. So the solution is a 34-year-old CJ Sapong. That's not a solution. This is a temporary stopgap, which is a temporary stopgap on top of a temporary stopgap in Adama Diomande. It's pretty clear that TFC is waiting for the summer transfer window to get a true number 1 starting striker. But it is a little concerning that this is now the 2nd striker significantly on the wrong side of 30 who was a notable scorer in MLS several years ago that we've gone and brought in as our solution to our striker problem. Even at his peak, CJ Sapong has only surpassed 10 goals in a Major League Soccer season 3 times. He's a guy who traditionally is good for 5 to 8 goals, 1 every 4 games in Major League Soccer, but even at that career pace over the last 2 seasons, this year in 8 appearances, 4 of them starts for Nashville, he has scored 0 goals, and last year in 33 regular season MLS appearances, he only scored 5 times. So Sapong has not recently been a high-level scorer in MLS. He is a workhorse, but what this team needs is goals right now, and Sapong isn't what is going to provide that right away. Also, given his age and TFC's history with injuries and our medical staff's history of not dealing well with those injuries, I mean, like Diomande at the age of 34, is he going to come in, tweak something, and all of a sudden be out for months? That is just an unknown, and it's something where if that occurs, if he gets injured within his first couple games at TFC, it's a trade now that we've made for nothing. To what we've given up, Lukas MacNaughton. MacNaughton is a very interesting player. He's not young, he's 28 years old, who just finally cracked Major League Soccer last year in 2022, coming to Toronto FC after helping Pacific FC of the Canadian Premier League win the 2021 Canadian Premier League Championship. Last year he was solid-ish for TFC. I mean, TFC had the worst defense in the league last season, and MacNaughton was a gap-filling starter for most of that, but he did outperform Daniil Henry after Henry was brought in, so obviously MacNaughton has some merit in and around Major League Soccer. However, we are getting rid of one of our 4 center backs in the one position we had depth over. We do replace that with the next move I'm going to talk about. But MacNaughton's an interesting one because you can always see that the ability for him to be a starting regular center back in Major League Soccer is there. Flashes of it have been there. It's just the consistency and the consistent good decision making haven't always been there. He's a guy who I like as a player and a guy who was a Canadian Premier League success story. So while he was not great for TFC, and specifically to start the season off has not been great for Toronto FC, it's not like TFC has ever sent another guy to Nashville who was underperforming at TFC, who then went and in a proper role for the guy and in a system that helped that player succeed, ended up having that player turn into a real star in MLS. That's never happened before. So if history repeats itself, Lukas MacNaughton might turn into a great player for Nashville. It's very much possible. And like for him and for the Canadian national team, I would like that to happen, but for TFC, if that does occur, it's just yet another failure of TFC to finish developing a player. Of course, Lukas MacNaughton leaving means that Toronto FC's depth in center back disappears, in which they had to make a trade with InterMiami to sort that out. Center back Aimé Mabika for $100,000 in GAM next year and potentially up to $100,000 more following. This is a guy who I am kind of excited about. 6'6" center back. This is an absolute unit of a man in the back end for Toronto FC. 17 appearances for InterMiami since the 2021 season, drafted in the second round of the 2021 MLS Super Draft by InterMiami. Now, guy out of college who's an absolute massive giant of a man at center back is something that has worked in MLS before, notably for Sporting Kansas City. We saw that they had a 6'6" center back completely nullify Sebastian Giovinco a couple years ago. So it's a play where, especially if the player is smart about it, doesn't make mistakes, plays the smart ball regularly, having an absolute massive center back is a massive asset. And at 24 years old, this is a young guy who has experience being a depth center back in MLS, and for this season, he's not going to be anything really other than that. He's just basically a like-for-like replacement for Lukas MacNaughton. So overall, the end result of these two moves is we give up $225,000 of general allocation money in 2024 and potentially up to another $175,000 in 2025 to do a like-for-like switch for Lukas MacNaughton, but to a younger center back who has potentially more upside than Lukas MacNaughton, and we get CJ Sapong as well. It's an interesting set of moves, and honestly, in the end of all this, CJ Sapong, who's the core centerpiece of all of this, might be in the end the least relevant part of the deal, because Lukas MacNaughton could go and be a significant factor in Nashville, and Mabika is a very interesting pickup. 24-year-old center back of that size, he could become a very useful piece for Toronto FC for years to come. It wouldn't surprise me if he plays more games for Toronto FC than Sapong does when it's all said and done. So overall, Toronto FC makes 2 trades to sort out the striker issue. That doesn't sort out the striker issue. It's as simple as that. Sapong's an interesting player, and he's a stopgap like Diamande was. So again, I'm not convinced, because Toronto FC is now in a spot where we have 4 strikers who all, in theory, could be decent off-the-bench number 2 strikers, and Diamande, Sapong, Akinola, and DeAndre Carr. Those 4 guys, all in theory, could be great number 2 strikers. We still don't have a number 1 striker. The number of 2B strikers we have is reaching ridiculous numbers. Like, how do we right now in the lineup have 6 guys you could reasonably play at striker, yet you can't reasonably start any of them at striker. That's just insanity. But with the injury history of Toronto FC over the past couple seasons, how this is going to go is Sapon's going to come in, he's going to play a couple games, he's going to get hurt, and then we're never going to hear about him again. Unfortunate, but with the recent history of Toronto FC, I can't expect anything other than that. Best case scenario, he stays healthy, starts regularly, scores a goal 1 every 4, every 5 games. That's not game breaking. That's not going to change how things work for Toronto FC going forward, unless maybe having an actual physical guy at striker opens up space for Bernadeschi and Insigne on the wings. We're going to need to see it in action, but right now it's not the move that is going to revolutionize Toronto FC's season. That is going to have to wait for the summer, and I guess the best we can hope for is that we keep ourselves in a close enough position that we can reasonably make the playoffs still in the summer. Bob Bradley definitely does not still have a job if they don't make the playoffs, so he is going to have to make moves to get this team into that position. And so definitely more stuff is coming. This is just yet another stopgap. So that is it for this video. As always, if you like to hit like, if you want to see more stuff, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, link is down below in the description, and I will see you next time.